Watch how Olly Robbins fires back with explosive testimony that sends shockwaves through Westminster, putting Keir Starmer under intense scrutiny. What starts as formal evidence quickly turns into a moment of real tension as claims of pressure, rushed decisions and ignored warnings come to light. You can feel the weight of every word, because this isn't just politics, it's about trust, accountability and national security. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Let's watch this explosive clip.
Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, rang Sir Philip and said, in terms stronger than those that I can use before the watershed.
I think you should.
Well, I'll just say that it was just to prove it with terms stronger than that. Does that accord with your impression?
Just fucking approve it.
Does it accord with your impression when you took over from Sir Philip?
I know this sounds formal and maybe even a bit unlikely, but thank you very much for the opportunity today to come and speak to you about these matters. As you say, it has been a difficult time, leavened slightly by it being my birthday yesterday.
Yes, all that.
So thank you for the opportunity to set things out. I won't go on at length, but I think there are three important framing points I need to make. Firstly, as you say, when I walked into post as Permanent Undersecretary on the 20th of January last year, I wasn't walking into a vacuum. I arrived to a situation in which a due diligence report had been undertaken into Mandelson by the Cabinet Office, assessing the reputational risks and his fitness for office. The Prime Minister had then presumably taken advice on his fitness for office. The name had been submitted to the King as Minister's recommendation. The Prime Minister had made an announcement that Mandelson was his nominee without caveats. The British government had sought agrément, the formal diplomatic process for a host government accepting a nominee from the US government, and that had been obtained before I arrived in post. He'd been given access to the building. He'd been given access to low classification IT, and from time to time, for case-specific issues, he was being given access to higher classification briefing. So I'm afraid I walked into a situation in which there was already a very, very strong expectation, and you would have seen the papers released already under the humble address, that coming from Number 10, that he needed to be in post and in America as quickly as humanly possible. The very first formal communication of this to my predecessor from Number 10 Private Office being that they wanted all this done at pace and Mandelson in post before inauguration. So that's the situation I faced.
I'm sorry, so there is paperwork about that, and that can presumably will be disclosed to Parliament?
It already has been, Chair. That letter from Number 10 Private Office is already in the disclosures made. There's nothing improper about it, but that's the context I walked into. So I'm afraid what that translated into for my team in the Foreign Office, and certainly the handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post, was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, I think are going to move on to other aspects, but I just want to probe a little bit further on one or two of the answers you've already given. You've described to us the situation when you arrived in post, the extent to which various steps had already been appointed, due diligence, the approval of the King, the obtaining of agrément. Were you surprised that all of those had been completed without the vetting process having been done?
Thank you, Sir John. In the narrow sense, I wasn't surprised because I've been following the news. So when I arrived in post, I knew perfectly well that the Prime Minister had made his appointment, that it had been announced. And of course, then in my handover with Philip, he told me about agrément and the other steps that you mentioned. As I look back, whilst the Foreign Office didn't see it as I understand it at the time, I am also completely unsurprised by Simon Case's advice to the Prime Minister of November 2024, that if he wished to make a political appointment, it would be the safest course to achieve security clearance before making the announcement. And I think, had I been in post, Philip will speak for himself, maybe he did, but had I been in post at around that time, that's what I would have advised as well.
So you think it should have been obtained before those steps were taken?
I think, as others have said publicly in the last few days, this is unusual because most people appointed to ambassadorial roles already hold clearance. Yep. But that's a very, very sensible position to be in, and it's what I would have advised in this case too.
Thank you. And you've also described...
I should say, I mean, in the American context, John, as you may well be aware, it's a particularly sensitive issue because the United States government is very hot on the clearances people hold, and so it would have been a sensible precaution.
And actually, had approval not been granted and therefore the position had been revoked after agreement had already been obtained, would that have damaged our relations with the United States, in your view?
I think it certainly would have had. I mean, I think it would have damaged them. Yes, Sir John. I mean, the process of getting agreement was taken at quite some pace, and was delivered, I think, still technically just by one working day by the Biden administration. I think if the nomination had changed after that point, the incoming administration may well have commented on it publicly, and it would, yes, have caused quite an issue in the relationship.
Right. And the dismissive approach of number 10, which you describe in your letter, you say that came from the fact that all of these steps had already been taken. Was there anything further which indicated to you that number 10 really didn't regard this as anything more than a formality which had to be completed?
To stay scrupulous, Sir John, nothing I can bear personal witness to, but certainly in my transition into the job, I was briefed obviously about the debate there had been about whether to vet at all, and that all added to a picture.
Thank you. Can I also ask a little bit more about the meeting you had on the 29th of January, which resulted in the decision to give DV clearance? You've said that you were briefed about the contents of the report by UKSV, but you didn't see it. Now, we understand, indeed, the government has published the template decision-making form, in which there are 3 boxes at the end, a green one, an amber one which says approved but remain valid concerns, and the red one, the final one, clearance denied or withdrawn. Now, we are told that the tick was in the red box, clearance denied or withdrawn. Now, that doesn't seem to me borderline. Were you aware that the tick was in the red box?
I have, before the government chose to publish it, I've never seen a form like that. And so if I may make 2 points to John, I certainly do not recall the way in which the UKSV findings were presented to me as being that definitive. As I say, it was briefed to me that they were leaning against, I think is the phrase I remember. But
leaning against is not the same as the decision. We are told that the decision, the recommendation rather, from UKSV was clear. The recommendation was denial. It wasn't leaning, it was denial.
Well, you asked me what I heard in that meeting, and I'm trying to remember to the best of my ability. The other point, which I think in the way you've asked the question you understand perfectly well, but just in case, that form is consumed differently in the Foreign Office and in half a dozen other departments than it is in other parts of the system. Those are recommendations and not decisions. And so what my team will have done, I'm sure, is break that down, go through the specific issues that have led UKSV to their concern, and then make an assessment as to whether they can be managed. And that's what came to me.
Your team did that. The meeting you had was only with the Director of Security, so it would have been his officials who have broken it down, and he would have reported to you the outcome of that process.
Right.
And a note was then circulated afterwards saying what the decision was. Did that note simply say, it has been decided that Lord Mandelson is to be granted clearance, or did it say, despite the recommendation of UKSV, it has been decided?
I think that minute is not a minute I can properly discuss, Sir John. It's no longer, sadly, my document. And as I said in answer to the Chair's questions earlier, it's a minute that certainly would give you, the public, but also our adversaries, quite a strong sense of how we try to manage that process.
Can I just, because there's a little bit of mounting confusion, I think, on the committee, and if it's not just on the committee, it might be with the public as well. Are you saying that UKSV didn't recommend that DV be denied? I've put in too many negatives there. Are you saying that UKSV didn't recommend that DV be denied? Are you saying that?
No, I'm trying to tell the committee what I was briefed in that meeting on the 29th.
You're saying borderline?
I was told it was a borderline case and that they leant against.
Borderline and leant against. And that's different, is it, to recommend that DV be denied?
I can only tell you the words I heard.
Said you were not aware that this box had a tick in it, a red box saying clearance denied.
Until the government published it, I've never seen a sheet like that, Sir John.
But even if you hadn't seen the sheet, you didn't know that the clear recommendation, final decision of UKSV was clearance denied.
I was told that it was a borderline case and that UKSV were leaning against granting clearance.
This is the most sensitive diplomatic appointment in British government. We have seen a form where both boxes were for denied. Did you not think to check if there is a precedent where someone's been denied to then inform the Foreign Secretary or the Prime Minister?
I'm sorry to harp on. Peter Mandelson was not denied vetting.
The recommendation
the UKSV report, in the case of the Foreign Office and half a dozen other departments, makes a recommendation on the basis of findings. That's then assessed, and a decision is made by the department by a capable, experienced and expert team. So I didn't think I'd better go and find out whether people who've had some particular risks highlighted in a UKSV report have then had that information shared with the Prime Minister or with any other minister, because to do so would immediately have opened up the box of the vetting system, which I hold to this hour is an important part of our national defences.
Let me pivot to a slightly different way, because the form that we've seen that you're saying you've not previously seen, both the boxes were red where it's high concern and clearance denied or withdrawn. But you're saying that's not a failure of vetting. So, related but separate. Once the disclosure of once Bloomberg had some emails disclosed to them and the Prime Minister was going forward at Prime Minister's questions, did you not think it was worth revisiting the UKSV document or having those discussions? And/or did you ever have any discussions about withdrawing security clearance now that new information has come to light?
So on the second part of your question, it didn't arise, honestly, because with Mandelson having been sacked with immediate effect from his post in Washington, his access to classified information was withdrawn immediately. And so, although, as you will know from the public documents, it took some days or even a couple of weeks for him to leave the government's payroll, the national security risk he could, in theory, have posed was eliminated immediately. The first part of your question again, sorry?
Once the Bloomberg, that cache of emails that Bloomberg had came to light, and you knew and this is questions on judgment, and I think I asked you this last time on the transcript, and so Chris Wormwood actually told us in answer to some of these questions that the due diligence has two parts. There's identification of information and then there's judgment. You knew that the Prime Minister was set to stand at the dispatch box and vouch for one of your members of staff.
Yep.
You were rightly concerned with your staff's reputation, but my question to you at that time was, were you not worried about the Prime Minister being misled? Were you not worried about him misleading the House, given that you had not told him the full picture?
Yeah, I hope I've explained. I don't think that it would have been proper for me to expose what you call the full picture to the Prime Minister. I don't think I had an obligation to do that. I believe very strongly I had an obligation not to do that. What I do remember distinctly is in the immediate aftermath of his sacking as the Prime Minister's nominee to Washington, I did consider the asking for the UKSV underlying documentation. And that was discussed on my behalf with the Cabinet Office, who initially said that I needed a national security justification for reading that documentation. And that's completely consistent with my understanding of the system.
I'm sorry to sound like a broken record. Is there a record of this?
What you've just witnessed is more than testimony. It's a rare glimpse behind the curtain of power. When Olly Robbins described an atmosphere of pressure, it struck a nerve. Because for many watching, this raises a deeply uncomfortable question. Were critical decisions rushed? And if so, at what cost? At the centre of it all is Keir Starmer, facing growing doubts, not just from political opponents, but from within the very system meant to support him. This moment matters because it goes beyond headlines. It taps into something people feel every day. The the need to trust those making decisions on their behalf. When that trust is shaken even slightly, it creates uncertainty that spreads far beyond Westminster. If you want to stay informed and understand what's really unfolding behind these explosive moments, make sure you're part of this conversation. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily.